Okay, guys, this is kind of a continuation of the the Great Awakening and the Age of Enlightenment. I posted the legacy. The legacy of the Great Awakening is that it resulted in new universities being created to train evangelical ministers, these new light ministers. This evangelism is going to spread to the southern colonies and result in Protestant churches that are based on evangelism, Baptist, Presbyterian, and Methodist. And the colonists are a very religious group. Estimate that 75 to 80% of colonists during this time period were church members of some church. This is bringing the colonies together. This is this unification of the 13 colonies that had been very, very different, but now they've got something in common with this region. You can see all the churches here in the background of New York just popping up. This is just a listing of the different buildings, and you can see the vast majority of the buildings are churches. Once again, this is just kind of the southern church, okay? So you can see it's packed to the gills. Let's talk about the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. You probably had some of this maybe in English or maybe with your global. And this was basically in Europe, and these people came out and they wanted to reform society using reason, challenging the old ways, challenging faith, challenging tradition. You'll get some of this if you're taking philosophy. Scientific method. Let's look at things logically. So basically this Enlightenment period is going to influence some of our founding fathers, including Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. And this Enlightenment thinking will play a huge role in the American Revolution and ultimately the French Revolution as well. Emphasis on liberty, democracy, republicanism, and religious tolerance. So one of the fathers of classical liberalism is John Locke. You have probably heard of him, and he definitely influenced Thomas Jefferson. He wrote he wrote the second treatise of government, and Thomas Jefferson used some of that wording, changed it a little bit in the Declaration of Independence. One of his theories, which was very controversial during the time, was that the mind was a blank slate, tabula rasa, and that the people we become are based on what we experience, their sensations, how we process ideas, and so forth. In his second treatise, I always have problems with that word, he argues that the individual ownership of goods and property is justified by the labor exerted to produce goods beneficial to human society. This is very much against the feudal system. His political theory, based on the social contract. Everybody has a natural right to defend life, health, liberty, or possessions. We're going to change those words up just a little bit. He also believed in the separations of powers in government, which we'll talk about with another kind of philosopher. And he was an advocate of tolerance. But he said if you were an atheist society, it could lead to chaos. So that he did believe there's a purpose in religion.
John Locke was an English philosopher and physician, known as the father of liberalism. Born in Somerset, England in 1632, he attended Westminster School and then went to Oxford University in 1652. Whilst at Oxford, Locke grew disillusioned at the curriculum of the college, as the emphasis of study was on classical philosophy rather than the works of more modern philosophers. He continued studying, however, and obtained his master's degree in 1658, and was elected a member of the Royal Society in 1668. He graduated with a Bachelor of Medicine degree in 1674. He began practicing medicine and became a member of the Earl of Shaftesbury's household and assisted him in his business and political issues, and then became secretary to the Board of Trade until 1675. After some prompting by the Earl, Locke began writing and composed his famous and controversial work, Two Treatises of Government, which was an argument against the monarchy and political legitimacy. He was then forced to flee to the Netherlands and returned after a 5-year exile. He then published his works, An Essay Concerning Human Understanding and A Letter Concerning Toleration, upon his return. His works discussed the concepts of identity and the self, as well as consciousness and knowledge. He is considered the first of the British empiricists, a theory that all knowledge comes from experience. He is known as one of the finest Enlightenment thinkers, which prompted intellectual discussion and opposed the intolerance of the Church and the State, and influenced modern liberalism. He died in 1704 and is buried in Essex, England.
Treatises. Okay, I got to keep working on that word. All right, y'all have heard of Thomas Paine, and he is certainly an Enlightenment philosopher. He runs into Benjamin Franklin when Benjamin Franklin's in England, trying to talk to Parliament and the King and convince them to lighten up on us. And Franklin convinces Paine to come to America. He loved America, and in 1776 he publishes Common Sense. And basically in this he says, how can a island govern a continent? During the Revolutionary War, he writes the inspiring American Crisis that talks about the summer soldier, and George Washington will actually have that read at Valley Forge. John Adams said, without the pen of the author of Common Sense, the sword of Washington would have been raised in vain, because he inspired the American people. He was a deist, again, much like many of our founding fathers, and he says God is kind of like the watchmaker. They acknowledge a superior power, but they question organized religion. The world is like a watch. It can't just appear. It has to be made by someone, so some superior being. They compare that to the watchmaker.
Hey guys, welcome to APUSH History. We're going to talk about the Zenger trial, John Peter Zenger, for a few minutes here, so you can wrap your head around it and understand it and get the question right on the exam. Now, first thing that we're going to say is that this is not a United States court case. It's 1733, meaning that we're still loyal subjects to the crown with terrible accents. Right? And in 1733, the new royal governor appointed by the crown is a guy by the name of William Cosby. I kid you not! His name is Bill Cosby. And Cosby is as corrupt as the night is dark. He does numerous things which are really fishy. But one thing that he did, which was pretty blatant, was as he was attempting to increase his salary and he was running into problems with the New York court system, he fired the Chief Justice, a guy by the name of Lewis Morris, and replaced him with a friend, Charles Delancey, so he could get his momo. So at this point, there's only one newspaper in town. That's the Gazette. And the Gazette was actually published by a guy by the name of William Bradford, who was actually John Peter Zenger's master apprentice when he first came to this country. So the Morris folks, the judge who was fired, kind of gather their energy and put it behind John Peter Zenger to start a new newspaper, the New York Weekly Journal, who will serve as a voice to the opposition to the governor, basically. And there was a lot of different writers. John Peter Zenger is not a writer. He's the publisher. Some of the writers included James Alexander, who was very famous for the day, speaking up against the government. And when that stuff was published, when they started calling him an idiot, started calling him out for the graft, for the corruption, John Peter Zenger is arrested for libel. At that time period, and even after that time period, libel meant that you were publishing things in the paper against the government. It was too dangerous. You were being seditious. You were being treasonous? You were being treasonous, so we had to put you in jail. And actually, John Peter Zenger's first lawyer was James Alexander, who had written under the pseudonym of Cato for the New York Weekly Journal. And at that point, the royal governor, Bill Cosby, remember Bill Cosby, he got this lawyer, Alexander, debarred. Really, he's using his royal power as the governor to do everything he can to crush the opposition. So at this point, John Peter Zenger, who ended up spending 10 months in jail, gets a new lawyer by the name of Andrew Hamilton. Not Alexander Hamilton, no relation, but Hamilton is a very famous lawyer, maybe the most famous lawyer in the colonies at that time period, from Philadelphia. And what Andrew Hamilton did at the trial was very interesting. Rather than addressing the charges as they stood, and the judge, who was Delancey, this is the judge that was appointed by the governor, man, this thing is corrupt, right, is instructing the jury that you have to find Zenger guilty, because libel means you publish stuff up against the government. Zenger did that, he is guilty. But Andrew Hamilton talks to the jury and basically says that this isn't just right. We could prove what they said in the New York Weekly Journal is true. Truth should be a defense against libel. That's the main idea in this case. And the jury is out for 10 minutes and comes back with a verdict of not guilty. And the courtroom goes wild. Zenger is free. We have set down the precedent that libel can be dismissed by truth. Not. Because it's not a precedent. I mean, this is just an idea that's being set down in the colonies, and this idea is going to eventually evolve itself into the Bill of Rights. Because there are royal governors after this that are going to still clamp down on press rights. And in fact, it really isn't until 1804 in the court case People versus Croswell where we're going to get this as a precedent that truth is a defense against libel. But this is a very important court case because it's setting down the idea and the concept that what's going to be the United States of America is going to have a different spin on freedom of press. We're going to protect the right to say what you want up against the government. So we hope you understand a little bit about John Peter Zenger and specifically the Zenger trial of 1733, 1734. And now you can go watch more videos and such like that. Where attention goes, energy flows, guys. Thanks for watching the video. And we'll see you next time that you press my buttons.
Okay. All right. So those were the questions that I wanted you to consider. I was going to have you write that out, but I think we'll do that Edpuzzle instead, okay? So that is the Enlightenment, short and sweet.